Good morning, everyone. So nice to see all of you. I hope if you were here yesterday, not just at the keynotes, but at the show, you had a chance to walk the show and see what's new. If you were at the keynote sessions yesterday, we made a promise that we were going to help you learn a little bit. And yesterday, what we learned from Jeff Evans, former Walmart executive, at-home executive, he shared some strategies and some insider secrets on how to win in today's very competitive marketplace, how to build value. And he talked about shocking value. And I think that's one of the takeaways I'm going to have from his presentation. Value has to be immediately understood by the, not just the retail customer you're trying to sell goods to, or if you're a retailer, it has to be understood by the consumer. And I thought Jeff shared some unique perspective on what it takes to win in today's marketplace. Our afternoon session yesterday was Joe Derechowski, who's the home industry advisor from Circana. And Joe did a unique presentation where he engaged the industry experts from Circana and several other consumer products industries to discuss what's going on in their business and how we can apply that to sort of a cross-category understanding of the home and housewares business and how we can optimize that. This morning we're going to hear from Tom Mirabile, who's with Springboard Futures. He is going to share the results of a home and living survey that he did in collaboration with the International Housewares Association. I'm going to share a little bit about that in a minute. And he's going to help us understand where the consumer is now with regard to their attitudes, preferences in the kitchen and throughout the house, and how that applies to housewares opportunity. And later on at 1 o'clock today, we will hear from Lee Eisman of Pantone, who will share her color forecast for the home business for this year, next year, and beyond. It's always a popular session, so get here early for that. I took notes about how I was going to introduce Tom, and then I realized I don't need notes. Tom and I have worked together in some capacity for about a dozen years, and we're very fortunate that he has been able to provide the Housewares show for many years with his insights on what's going on in trend. Tom has vast experience on the retail and the manufacturing side, and he founded Springboard Futures a few years back to provide industry guidance, advisory services, and market research on consumer trend. But what makes Tom really different than other trend forecasters and advisors is Tom understands he understands the home and housewares business from manufacturing to the home. So when he looks at trend, and when he evaluates trend, and when he makes a forecast on trend, he's not just looking at it from sort of a 30,000 foot above the industry. He's intimately involved in understanding all aspects of it. And I think that actually lends even more credibility and actionable insight. What Tom is going to share with you today, this is a little self-promotion if I could. I'm also the editor-in-chief of Homepage News, in addition to my role directing education for the IHA and the show. And we've been working with Tom on several research projects in the past year, things that he's done before, but we've kind of updated a little bit. And the IHA, you'll start seeing announcements about this after the show, is going to release a comprehensive state of the industry, and it's going to be made up of many parts. Part of it's going to be market share data, market size data that we will get in collaboration with Circana, who Joe Derechowski represents. Tom and his home and living survey and other facets of his research are going to be included as one segment, so we have insight into the consumer. And we're also going to include some research that we did that really directly asks consumers. It's an outlook on what they're going to buy in the coming months and why they're going to buy it. So stay tuned for more information on that to come. But in the meantime, we're going to get started with a preview of a lot of that research and Tom's insights in today's presentation. So with that, I am so pleased to introduce Tom Mirabile.
Thank you, Peter. It's the first presentation I've ever worn jeans for, and a jacket that's stretchy. So, one of the reasons we started this particular survey with our friends and project partners, and of course the IHA, was because a few years ago, actually just before the pandemic, a lot of large research firms said, you know what, we're not going to talk about generations anymore because there's too much cross-influence, and we can't really, nobody lives in those kinds of silos anymore. They're all influencing each other and things like that. And from the minute that started, I had a problem with it because we may be cross-influencing, but we're still very distinct. I'll give you an example. So I was at Staples, and I had lost my wallet, no great surprise, and I had to pick up an order, and the woman wanted to see some ID, so I gave her my passport. And I handed it to her, and she's like, wow. And I said, what? She said, you were born in the 1900s. And I was like, is this where we're going with this? You know, what are you, 12? But, you know, she was like, but we're going to start hearing that, right? So, and I think that or somebody offered to help me up the subway with my suitcase when I was coming back for a trip. And I hear behind me, can I help you with that? And I was like, no, you can't help me with that. But like 10 years ago, I would have been like, fine. So I think that we all live in the moment that we're in, but we still launch off of a certain perspective that is the anchors. We're going to talk about those. So what we did was we basically went in and said, okay, home, housewares, what makes generations different, and how do we react to that? And that's kind of what we're going to do. So the first thing I wanted to do was to show you one of the other things that this woman at Staples said was, I just love the 80s. And I immediately thought of like the 80s. And I said, what do you associate with the 80s? She's like, I don't know, like neon colors and big bubbly fonts. And when I think of the 80s, I think of this, because this is what I looked like in 1982. Really bad blue mohawk. And, you know, luckily I kept those muscular arms. But it's just not good. So what we started out with the Home and Living Survey was a prime directive. And Leanne, who is actually here from Project Partners with us, we said, how do we frame what we want to say? We want to spotlight generational perspectives and lifestyle realities, and then sort of quantify what those variances do. The reason we say perspectives is because we act on, let me put it, we don't act on realities, we act on perceptions. So a lot of the things that we buy, the choices that we make, the things that we want to own are a result of the generation we were born to. So, and we want to see how that's affecting the way people buy. This is, I promise this is a quick, boring thing, but it's important that you know it. This is the criteria that we used when we did the survey. It's not, we were very careful to stick to the census and all of that. It's important to note that we did not count Gen Z under 18 years old because, I don't know, like counting allowance into what they're purchasing didn't feel right. Also, we had one sort of restriction. We asked the question at the beginning, do you regularly cook at home, on a regular basis for yourself and for others? If they said no, then they were, thank you for your time and so on and so forth. But the rest was based on census or unrestricted gathers. The ages and incomes are all census-based. So we do this every year. It's just a quickie. And again, it's kind of a numbers page. But when we look at the different generations, Gen Z, right now, they are 13 to 28 years old. The numbers that we're showing you today are largely starting at 18 because that's when we look at having incomes that start meaning something to the economy and to our businesses. Wealth per capita doesn't really apply here yet. Average household spending, this was surprising because they have a lot of household spending, either directly or indirectly. 74% of them rent their homes and 26% own their homes. It's a very high number for this generation. It was amped up by the effects of the pandemic and that it became, their parents wanted them to have homes. Millennials, 29 to 44 years old, 21% of the population, 9% of per capita wealth. And when we look at per capita wealth, wealth is the percent of total assets that the generation has, including property, houses, cars, income, accumulated income, stocks, and so on. For half of them rent, and a little over half of them own. Again, these guys were amped up for home ownership, so that's great for our businesses. Gen X, 45 to 60 years old, 20% of the population, 26% of per capita wealth, 25% of household spending, 31% of them rent, and 69% of them own their homes. They're mortgaged. But so as you start looking at this, is a very balanced generation. What's important about this generation in particular right now is Americans peak between 45 and 55. That's where their income peaks. So they're not going to have a lot more disposable income than they do right now. Boomers, my favorite. 61 to 79, 20% of the population, 52% of the wealth, 36% of the average household spending, 21% rent their home, and now you see all the home ownership really going up there because, and again, these people are very important to our business still. We're going to be doing a report later on in the year. We noticed some real big variances. Show of hands, who's heard of Gen Jones? Generation Jones? So Gen Jones is the first half of boomers, the first 10 years. And late boomers is the other half. There are huge disparities in our home categories between how they spend money, how they spend their time. We're going to be releasing a report on that soon. But I mean, just great variances because younger boomers are still spending a lot on product and home, and older boomers are spending more on experiential product. And then silent generation. You can see the numbers. We're not going to talk about them a lot because less than 3% of their disposable income goes into our industry, really. And then you can just skip the first two, but basically, we wanted to show the debt per capita of the various generations. So you can see Gen Z's kind of up there. Millennials are very high. And when you look at millennial debt compared to millennial savings, and then you look at Gen X debt compared to savings, there's a big disparity. I mentioned this before, but it's important to keep it in mind. Millennials are absolutely experienced junkies. And when they first started working, they started building debt and spending a lot of money. So only 17% of millennial debt is education debt. Everybody thinks, oh, there's college debt and all that. It's not. It's experiential debt. It's travel. It's some product, but a lot of experiential debt. Boomers, a really nice nest egg of their savings per capita, and then disposable income. And you start seeing the disposable income go down here because really what's happening is that they're keeping money in savings. They're really spending. They're spending interest. They're spending a lot of money, but they're not earning anymore as much. So, and then again, silent generation just as a reference point. So what we thought was really important was we wanted to say, okay, everybody's always asking, well, what separates generations? It's just people. But we wanted to put together a very cheat sheet, basically, of what makes generations different. So let's look at Gen Z first. What are their core traits? Authentic, inclusive, entrepreneurial, socially aware. What are they defined by? They're defined by digital nativity, not Christmas, but they're digital natives. They grew up into digital. They are all about mobility, carrying things with them, being able to pick up and move, and then collaboration. When we say collaboration, you look at brands that ask their consumers, what do you want? What's the next color you want to see? What's the materials? What's the functions that you want to see? This generation expects that kind of commerce communication. Characteristics, they're naturally skilled at navigating online platforms. It's just innate. They demand authenticity, transparency, and responsibility. And that goes all the way down to influencers. Everybody they talk to, they want that. They're invested in mental health and well-being. Probably not surprised at that. And they're very attuned to climate change, diversity, and social justice. One of the things that's interesting is we continue to see numbers kind of go down on Gen Z and also millennials when it came to environmentally sustainable product. We couldn't figure it out. When we dug a little deeper, we found out that they're simply not looking at brands that aren't responsible. So it looks like they've deprioritized it, but really they're blocking those brands out. They've got blinders onto them, and they expect that now. They're actually putting a lot more time and investment into social issues. They also have more exposure to the world, to world news, to politics, to other cultures than any generation prior, so they're much more globally aware. Millennials, core traits, socially conscious, tech savvy, of course, and very purpose-driven. They're defined by technology integration and their own influence. This is a generation that is absolutely addicted to the influence that we've been telling them that they have, and they do have, since well before they had an income to influence. Their characteristics, they are optimistic, also collaborative. They're restless. They don't like to stay in one place for very long. They don't like to keep a job for very long. They want to move on faster. They prioritize experiences like travel and personal growth over material goods. This generation is really, I mean, they master, does everybody know what reverse mentoring is? It's like when our kids told us how to use a computer or what computer to buy. So instead of mentoring from parents to kids, kids were mentoring parents, and this generation really created that. They prefer access over ownership. So they don't want to own things, they don't want to be bogged down by things. They want, well, they want Netflix, you know, as opposed to the 3 cabinets of DVDs I have. They're constantly seeking meaning in their work and their lives, and they often struggle with economic pressures. They actually didn't create that on their own. They got a lot of that from Gen X, which you're going to see in a minute. So when we look at Gen X, 45 to 60-year-olds, their core traits, they're self-reliant, they're skeptical, and they're resourceful. These are the first latchkey kids. They're very independent. They are all about balance. This generation lost a lot of their personal savings in like 2008 in that recession area. And so they are, but now, as you look at the numbers, they've got it all back, so, or most of it. So, but they are not looking for anything stable. They don't expect stability. They want to stay agile. They embrace alternative lifestyles. They embrace countercultures with their kids. They are early adapters of technology, and because they were a part of that, they're a bridge generation. So they really helped boomers adopt technology faster than they would have. Work-life balance and family, again, really strongly affected by the last recession. And then finally, baby boomers. Competitive, driven, idealistic. They're defined by optimism, ownership, and affluence. And something interesting about boomers, you know, in their youth, they're very idealistic. So it was like Woodstock, and it was, you know, a lot of sort of, you know, anti-government, you know, and then they got to career-focused in midlife, and then now they're moving towards nostalgia. So you see that in the products, it's terrific. They experience a cultural shift from rebellion to responsibility, like environmental activism, and then also career and family focus, which is where they are now. They really value face-to-face communication. And so wherever you can, you know, bring that in, it's very helpful. So the first section, and actually the largest, is we're calling it Meals and Making. It's about balancing cost and consciousness. So what we did was we asked people about how they spend their time, what they cook, when, but we're just showing you the important stuff here. So what are the most important reasons you choose to create meals and foods at home? Number one was affordability, and that was a surprise, especially by the margin as high as it is. The second was healthier choices. The third was that they want to control ingredients and flavors. And then you get down to the other two, quality time with friends and family, building cooking skills and creativity. What's interesting about this is that as you move through these, they work off of each other. So you need more creativity, you need more cooking skills because you're spending more time with your family and you don't want to get tired of it. And we're very happy to say that figures are showing that the amount of cooking at home that we did just after the pandemic, we've really sustained that, so that's great for us. So which of the following do you prepare at home most or all of the time? Not surprisingly, everyday household meals was like the number one. 88% of respondents said that they did. And it's just interesting, you know, when you look at the fact that nearly 90% of American households say that they, you know, and this is regardless of generation. There's no generational difference here. They all came up within 2 points of that number. That's a big number. So informal entertaining was actually kind of a surprise that it was this high. This is when you plan a little bit more. And so it's surprising to see that not a lot of this is being taken in from the outside, not a lot of totally prepared foods. Celebrations and themed events. So birthdays, New Year's, Halloween, all of those occasions, costume parties. Again, a nice solid number. Casual get-togethers we see as the biggest opportunity. Simple food and drinks, you know, guests are encouraged to sort of chat and meet each other and, you know, just spend time in each other's company. And this is where we see the really building opportunity. Because most households entertain the same 6 people eight times a year. It's like, so what can we do to bring in that change? This was a really important question. In the year ahead, how often do you plan to cook at home compared to last year? 58% said more often. 41% said about the same, and only 1% said that they plan on doing it less. So, important comparisons. This is where we start seeing a lot of generational difference. When you look at, the center is average population, okay, what we just talked about. On the left is millennials and Gen X. They are within striking distance, but they lead the trend. 69% of millennials and 63% of Gen X are planning to increase cooking at home throughout 2025. Boomers lagged. Only 35% plan to cook at home, more this year. But don't let that be a bad number. The fact that we're able to keep 65% about the same, it gives us a lot of opportunity. What's really interesting about these numbers is females, 50% are planning to cook at home more often, and 48% about the same. Males, 65% of males are saying that they are planning on cooking at home more often, versus 26% are saying about the same. So, and what's interesting is, and it's all in cities. That difference isn't happening in rural or suburban areas. So when we look at that, the fact is we can't always know why things are happening. But we can't not respond to it. Because what do you do when your major markets are now, you've got more men cooking? What does that do to the colors that you run, to the way you assort your markets regionally? All of those things affect you, or affect us. I'm going to let you read this yourself, but the next few questions are about how much do you actually make and how much do you buy? So we thought it was important to let people understand that when we say semi-homemade versus mainly homemade, there's a distinct difference between those two. You can use jarred ingredients in one. The other is like, okay, you can use canned tomato paste or things like that. But it really made a difference in how people define their answers. So which meals do you most frequently prepare mainly homemade? Not surprisingly, number 1 was weekday dinner. Weekday breakfast was number 2. And then you can see where it comes down from there. But what's great about this is look at the balance. You're not seeing really big spikes or big drops. You've got weekday breakfast, weekend dinners, and weekday lunches weekday lunches being high like that, there's opportunity in there, so, because it's make and take businesses. And then when we go to semi-homemade, then you start seeing things change a bit. Weekday lunches go up. Weekday dinners dominated, mainly homemade. But weekday breakfasts were really a surprise that this many people were making breakfast, even semi-homemade and which is eggs and things like that. So we wanted to just sort of tie it up with when you look at weekend lunches and dinners, they both tied for 3rd place, but both have 18% fewer fans than mainly homemade. So people are still willing to put in the time for better nutrition and to get things mainly homemade. The other big thing was snacks were very high. And we saw larger companies like Target and Walmart take on the snack business and do a really great job with it. They addressed the fact that younger millennials and Gen Z really like more savory than sweet and that they want healthier snacks and all of that. So it's interesting to see the consumer taking snacks back because it's expensive. And also there are packaging issues for younger generations and their consciousness about that. But you've got to ask yourself, how can we get that business back? Because how many products do we really have that even talk to snacking, aside from snacking storage? Okay, so time spent. Time spent was really interesting. How much time do you spend on an average weekday making homemade and semi-homemade foods? Largest number, 30 to 45 minutes. And this is all meals combined, lunch, whatever you're doing, it's semi-homemade. 26%, 15 to 30. So we're seeing 15 to 30 grow. 30 to 45 is about the same. 45 to 60 actually grew from the last numbers that we had from, who was it from? Not Nielsen, it was Nielsen, no, Hartman. And so we think that, what's happened is we've built an audience of people who really enjoy cooking, they know how to do it better, and that's why that's coming up. But what we did was we said, okay, Now let's look, if you look at the right side of the screen, at the back is average weekday, and at the front is average weekend day. And what we thought was surprising was that we all kind of go around thinking that on weekends, we take the time we cook, right? And it's not true. In fact, we spend a little less time cooking on weekends than we do the rest of the week. And that includes things that we're making ahead, family dinners for Sundays. So it's just interesting to see our demand for time, our demand for experience in our lives, our demand for time with our family and our friends does not decrease on weekends. It actually goes up. And that's something important to keep in mind when we're thinking about outdoor grilling, things like that, where we traditionally say that we're going to give that a little bit more time. We also wanted to look at how often do you make foods at home and take them other places? We didn't expect this at all. So we asked people which, if any of these, are the reasons that you frequently take food away from home. Now, we expected to consume it at work. We didn't honestly expect it to be 50%, but that's good. We did not expect 40% of people to say that they make food to take and consume while they're driving or while they're on their commute, which is interesting because in New York now you're not allowed to eat or drink on the subway. So consume at school, 38%. And also what was really high was consume at outdoor leisure and sporting events, things like that, tailgating. Again, really high. And again, you're seeing those three numbers really close side by side. It means that the opportunity for takeaway, for make it and take it, is very high, not just for storage, but for new ideas of what to do with those things. Consuming at school, not unexpected. That's not as high as it was. So, and then finally we kind of wrapped up this area by saying, what parts of preparing food at home do you find the most challenging or difficult on a regular basis? Number one was cleanup time and effort. And we expected it to be prep and cooking time, but it's not. Cleanup time, and it's so funny. I always say, I never think of my own life while I look at statistics, but this is exactly how I live. This is the one thing we're fighting about. What, because you cooked, I have to clean? So I've just stopped eating at home. But cleanup time and effort, big opportunity. So you look at some companies who I won't name, but they have gone in, Cuisinart Kitchen, they've gone into sinkware in a really big way. They've made sure that they have permission from their consumers to get into that, Brabantia. But there's a lot of people who are land grabbing, but carefully, and making sure that they look at the kitchen as much of a prep place and socialization place as it is a cleanup place. Cost and expense, again, from the first slide, cost and expense came up really high in a lot of surveys this year, not surprisingly. Prep and cooking time, advanced planning and prep. We didn't really expect this to be this high, but a lot of it is going to make aheads, things that you make in advance for the week. New meal ideas and recipes, also high. So, and what's interesting is, I almost don't want to say this, they're not really going to brands for content. They're going to independent sites that have a lot of experience in finding it there. And available kitchen space. So one of the other things that, to just jump back, available kitchen space, 30%. Size is always important. That didn't sound right, but you know what I mean. So when we look at the first numbers and said who's going to be cooking more at home, they were predominantly city dwellers. So what happens when you've got city dwellers cooking at home more, wanting new product, and you hit this available kitchen space being a problem? It means that multifunction, that nesting, the collapsing, that all those things that save space are going to be important. Okay, so then we go to decision drivers. When we talk about all of this, we kind of look at perspective, which is what we just talked about, and this is kind of like persuasion, So what is influencing the decisions that these people make? What are your favorite resources for food, meal, and recipe inspirations? Social media platforms were number one. Cooking and recipe websites were number two. Friends and family was a close third. And search engines were still up there. This chart, because it's not based on 100, it looks skewed, but look at this. None of them are more than 7 points apart. These are all fairly even. So it means that you kind of have to decide where you're going to put where you're going to invest in terms of how you support your brand. So we want to look at two things: generational influence on trend and inspiration. So when you're looking for new recipes, when you're looking to see what's going on and what's cool, or what are the cool parties going to be this summer and things like that, search engines were selected by 40% of people. Gen Z, 50%. Social media was selected by 47% of respondents as being important. Boomers, only 33%. So obviously, we're seeing that boomers are not as connected with social as in terms of influence. But what's really surprising here is that Gen Z is 10 points above the mean on using search engines. They're not, and we're talking, Google, Yahoo, we're not talking about going straight to Amazon or straight to a specific site. We're talking about the highest level of just, general searches, because they know what they're looking for. Where do you most often learn about new home and housewares products that you would like to purchase? This was really, really surprising. So when you look at this, social media platforms, a lot of influence, not surprising. And again, you have to decide. There's a lot of data out there that will tell you if you are this type of a company, this type of a brand, then this is where you should be investing in your social media. You don't have to be everywhere. Family and friends, that's a big number. And we're not talking social media family and friends. We're talking word of mouth. So search engines, again, way up top. Recipe websites have climbed, so that's, again. And then TV programs. So we're really talking Food Channel and things like that. So generational influence on product discovery. Social media platforms were selected, we just saw, by 50%. Gen Z is 8% above the mean. Boomers are 10% below the mean. So again, if you're going after a boomer customer, you're not going to want to put everything in social media, and if you do, you want to know which ones, Facebook, things like that. Family and friends were selected by 41% as how they discover new products. Gen Z, 46%. So again, above the mean. Where do you purchase home and housewares most frequently? So not really surprising, mass market retail. Online was a surprise because you've got half of consumers, and the pandemic did us a lot of good this way because it made people like me who are not necessarily comfortable not seeing something, not trying it. Between that and return policies, we just had to do it. So we got very good at it very fast. Better grocery stores. This was a really surprising number. You've got 40% of people saying that they purchase home and housewares products at Better Grocery. So it just shows that they've done a really good job of the trade up. They've done a good job of land grabbing off of specialty retail. And of course, houseware specialty stores are suffering because of that. The work of well-being. So the way we look at well-being, and there's only a couple of slides on this, but when you see the full report, you can delve into it. It's really, for different generations, an intersection of obstacle and opportunity, okay? So when we ask people what aspects of wellness are most important to you, some interesting shifts here. Physical wellness was near 60%. Nutritional wellness is up at 51%. But the big surprise is emotional wellness at 46%. And again, it's the difference between these is really quite low. Intellectual wellness, 37%, and social wellness. And intellectual wellness, by the way, is is being driven predominantly by boomers. Memory retention, sensory retention, and then social wellness at 36%. So when we look at how that broke out, generational influence on wellness priorities. Emotional wellness was selected by 46% of respondents as like a top priority. Gen Z over-indexed by 10%, and boomers under-indexed by 6%. And honestly, a lot of that is because Gen Z is a super stressed generation. I was talking to a couple of my cohorts yesterday about this. When you look at Gen Z, every generation has had its issues, right? But Gen Z has gone from governmental and social issues to health issues to the pandemic to massive debt. I mean, they don't look at the future the way previous generations do. They're not tackling one thing at a time. They're tackling tomorrow. So they're lots of obesity issues, lots of social media shaming, and dysmorphia happening on social media. Emotional wellness is very important to them, and a lot of that for our businesses is digging into these positive social experiences, family and friends, and building IRL in real life experiences. So we said, when considering your personal health and well-being goals, which would you like the most to improve? Physical activity was number one at 51%. And what's interesting was that number two was nutrition. This is kind of an important shift, because what we're seeing is we're seeing movement away from the visible, the physical, and more attention being paid to the inside. There's new drug introductions that sort of help with that too. Weight management is up at 46%. Sleep and restfulness. Now, when you have a public that's saying sleep and restfulness is nearly just as important as nutrition, that's a huge opportunity still, because we see sleep and restfulness. There's a lot of products that are, addressing that, and then stress management again. So again, look at all the opportunity that's happening. There's no big spikes here. There are opportunities in every one of these needs that are not being met. Illness prevention and sexual health are at the end. We left them in kind of for context. I thought what was interesting, though, was the people who worry most about sexual health and fitness are Gen Z. Why? Do anything you want. So let's look at generations for those wellness things. 47% said nutrition was important. It was most important to Gen Z, 55%, and boomers at 52%. They're both over-indexing there. Weight management, 46% said it was important. Boomers outpaced the others by 10%, and 56% of them said they wanted improvement. And a lot of this is because boomers see weight management as being endemic to health issues. They don't see it as a physical desire anymore, like other generations may. They see it as being associated with illness. Physical activity. Physical activity was the number one choice overall, but boomers over-indexed at 58%. It's a challenge. They want it to be useful, but super easy. I know I do. And stress management. Stress management, 43%, but it was a real hot spot for Gen Z. 52%, 9% wanted improvement versus only 32% of boomers who said that stress management was an issue. So we asked them, which health and wellness products are you likely to purchase in the coming year? You know what I'm going to say. They're all fairly close, but healthy meal making was number one, thank God. Sleep and relaxation was number two at almost 40%. Hydration, which you would think we've had enough of hydration, right? We've got everything for hydration. Still up at 33%. Fitness gear and equipment, and home environment. And one of the things that we aren't showing you here is that one of the biggest issues for fitness gear and equipment was, again, expense. So we have to find ways of letting people become more healthy at home, and it doesn't cost a lot. Home environment, lots of opportunity there. And again, this is an area that we tend to think is kind of done, but now you're seeing aromatherapy come back, and so that's really important. Fitness wearables and trackers. It's a narrower business and it's a lower margin business, so I wouldn't chase it, but that's me. Which dimensions of wellness do you find the most challenging to achieve in your everyday life? Physical wellness, number one, 50%. Nutritional wellness, number two, at 43%. Again, there's so much opportunity in here. Emotional wellness, again. And I think emotional wellness is something that we tend to shy away from because it's not really tangible, But we have to, when you look at other industries, like fragrance at the European markets, lots of movement in there. Lots of new ways to self-soothe and new aromatherapy options. Social wellness, 30%. And social wellness here, the directive is not social wellness the people. The directive is social wellness for younger people inside our homes and things like that. And intellectual wellness we talked about. What obstacles interfere with your achievement of those? Time was number one. Time limitation was number 10. Cost of tools required was number two. And physical limitations. Physical limitations played a really unusual role in this survey. Not just because we expected it, because boomers are getting older and things are harder and we all want to buy more ergonomic products, but Physical limitations strain kept coming up across generations, and it was just as important to millennials and Gen Z as it was to boomers and Gen X. Knowledge needed. Knowledge needed is important. And I think that a lot of times we produce products, but we don't necessarily tell people precisely what it does. Knowledge needed is really more about confusing mixed messages coming in. Consumers are getting a lot of different opinions, different facts about what's good for them, what's not good for them. So providing that with the product is important, preferably in an ongoing sort of app-based environment. Space available in the home, again. And then the number of options, the fact that things are confusing, that is, yeah, that's an issue. Trouble with tasks. This is the last one. And I guess what we would say about tasks is when you see the results, frustrations are going to map function and features. That's how we're going to build business. So which of the following tasks do you find most challenging and difficult to achieve? Again, after meal cleanup, preparing daily family meals, about assortment and variety. How do we do it? And a lot of times you're seeing, this is dovetailing with multifunction really well too. So tidying personal spaces. This, by the way, was a list of, I think, we gave them 13 issues, and these were the top 5. But tidying personal spaces, like as in cleaning your room, that's what we're talking about. And then cleaning drawers and closets. You look at people like Utopia and a lot of other great companies, but it's like you look at the product and you're like, I never clean anything and I want to buy this. Because now they've really gotten into design, and a lot of them have gotten into design and functionality that really is colorful, beautiful, well-shaped and stuff. Cleaning bathrooms, 22%. It's just disgusting. So, which of the reasons listed, and we gave them, I think 3 more than this, best describes what makes these chores challenging and difficult? Number 1, takes too much time. We keep seeing time no matter where we go in the home. This I put in because I wasn't really expecting it to come up high, but I said it's disgusting. It's just messy and unpleasant, and it came up as the number 2. So how do you reel that in? Physical limitations. Again, cross-generation physical limitations were important. Too strenuous, part of physical limitations. And then impossible to finish. The idea of not being able to finish anything is an enduring problem. And then if you look at all these things we've talked about, and in the survey we took them through the various things that we talked about. Of all of them, what most hinders you just living your best life? Time limitations was number 1. Affordability was number 2, and that's a big climb. Cleaning up afterwards. It sounds funny, like afterwards what? But cleaning up afterwards, planning and preparation, getting ahead of things, and then space limitations. So, this is like what Peter and I have been talking about for years. It's that idea of the pillars don't change. We want more time, we want more space, we want more experience, we want more value. They're all here in the final roundup, and they're all within, like the top are within 10 points of each other. So there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity. So when we look at obstacles and pain points, time limitations took the lead, 42%. The people that felt it most keenly were Gen Z, at 12 points ahead of the average, and less of an issue for boomers at 31%. A lot of that is because boomers, and if you look at home ownership, you'll see boomers are kind of getting rid of their houses, they're moving into apartments, less cleanup time, less property to take care of, and so they just don't have as much to organize, and they buy less. And a lot of you, if you saw Joe Derechowski talking yesterday, one of the things that he brought up was that we're reaching a period where we're replacing a lot of the things that we bought during the pandemic. Older boomers are doing less of that replacement, so targeting younger consumers is better. Affordability at 30% was an issue that was across generation. 46% of Gen Z said it was a problem, so obviously they're hurting more. Personal physical limitations, 27%, but it spiked for boomers at 38%, 11 points ahead of the mean, and the amount of cleanup involved in everyday living was right behind it. And that was a pain point that was across generations, but it was particularly high for urban dwellers. And then finally, space limitations, 28%. It's another stumbling block that goes across all generations. So that's kind of what we got. When you see the report, it's much more nuanced than this. I wish that I had a lot of time to talk to you. But, and just a reminder, we are still doing the value equation index. Well, that'll be coming up in a couple of months. We're working with the IHA on that now. And so that addresses, what creates value right now. We decided not to do it this year, to do it a little bit later. And then we're also going to be doing food and flavors report with project partners. So.
Join me in thanking Tom Mirabile this morning. Tom has mentioned Leanne Schwarzkopf of Project Partners Network. And Leanne, can you just stand up so everyone can?
Yeah, Leanne.
Come on, take a bow.
You made me promise I wouldn't ask her any questions.
Leanne is an equal partner in the madness that Tom delivers here on a regular basis.
Is Michelle Lamb here?
What's that?
Michelle, are you here? Michelle, stand up. You all probably know Michelle Lamb, but she has been a tremendous partner in all of this. And,
a reminder, I referenced it earlier, and Tom has referenced it a couple times. We are going to be preparing a comprehensive report that will be published by Homepage News. It's an IHA project that, in collaboration with Springboard and his partners. It'll be coming this spring. We will have coverage of this session, and we may even talk to Tom about making some of it available to people as well too, through some of those channels. We have some time for questions. I want to start with a couple of questions.
I hate your questions because they're always good.
Okay. You've shown us a lot of charts where we have these sort of equal size bars of opportunity. Yeah. And the question is, do you think companies should try to tick off as many of those boxes kind of at one time or within their mix? Or
I couldn't have asked you to ask a better question. So yesterday, Leanne and Michelle and I were talking about, the importance of experience, right? And one of the things that we were discussing was experience is still very important. But for every generation, it can't live alone. Like it used to be you could sell something to millennials because it was a great experience. But now, you have to have added value. I'm sorry to do this, but I have to bring up a particular vendor because they're top of mind. Dash is a great example. So Dash
delivers. You promised not to mention brands earlier.
I know, but I don't work for you. But when you look at the brands that you see that are really advancing, they're delivering product that, like, you don't go out there now and see product that just looks like, you see product that looks great, that is very functional. So functionality, and I mean, DIH has been pushing this for a while, but it's really happening. Functionality goes with design. You've got to be able to check off as many boxes, but the only way to do that is to make sure you understand who you're selling to and who you want to sell to, because they're often very different things.
Similarly, what are the warning signs, or what are the caution signs, I should say, with trying to make a product multifunctional?
Saying that it's unique. One of the things that I keep seeing on the floor is, the one and only, multifunction this. I think that, and the first person I ever heard say this was Liana Salama. She said, I hate functionality for its own sake. Like garbage pails that open by themselves and you're just going to put something on the counter and the garbage pail opens and running. Technology for technology's sake is just bad. Technology for the sake of time and ease is wonderful. Just make sure that you're doing something competitive and just layering on a bunch of functions that nobody needs.
They have to be meaningful and they have to work well. Mm-hmm. We have some time for questions out here. Right up front. Hold on for the microphone, please.
Your questions are always hard.
Okay.
Is that on?
I have one comment and one question to stump you. So my comment would be, given how generative AI, like OpenAI's ChatGPT, I'm using search engines less and going to ChatGPT to ask for help with meal planning, purchase recommendations. I would consider adding generative AI as another thing beyond family and friends, social media, websites for where people find information. So that's comment one. And the question to stump you, I've read Swedish death cleaning. Do you see, as boomers getting older, the concept of people trying to clean and organize to
Getting ready to die.
Okay, yeah.
Well, I personally am not doing it, but that's what Haiga is. So I mean, that's kind of been here, and nobody lives to tell whether it worked or not. But you know, I think when you approach it in the right way, it really comes off as being present and being, you know, and living every moment and all of that stuff that sounds like a bad Susan Polishchutz card. When it comes to generative AI, there are a lot of different opinions from different designers and different design directors. I have some issues with generative AI, mainly because it's always going to be iterative. I think that when you're looking at ChatGPT and you're trying to gather, like when we do a survey, we try to, you know, we sit down and we say, okay, we know what is already out there being surveyed. What's not being surveyed? What are we forgetting? I love ChatGPT for that. I'm much more conservative when it comes to design issues. I think that it could be hard on the way you present product to customers because it's so perfect. It's so, I mean, look, I've worked for great companies where we were already designing things we were having a problem making, okay? So I don't need to present a gorgeous conceptual rendering on something that is not necessarily stable. It also feeds a marketplace that is selling things that simply don't exist. And I'm not going to name retailer names, but you all know about them. We're seeing so much product out there that isn't even there. And I think that, I mean, look, it's as part of a process, as a part of a holistic design process, I think it's important. But, you know, somebody who I work with a lot said just a couple of days ago, you always know when somebody's using either Gen AI for a design product or they're using ChatGPT to write, you know, copy. It doesn't sound like your voice. It sounds like.
I swear I've never used ChatGPT to write one of my columns, so I do.
I don't either, and it takes me for fucking ever. But I mean, I would like to, you know, but it just.
Joe Derechowski said something yesterday, or maybe one of the people in there said, the consumer doesn't really think of AI, generative AI, as a feature, even though many companies out there are talking about generative AI as if somehow that made the perfect product, because it doesn't always get things necessarily right. But I just think it's going to be part of our world, and there needs to be a human element involved with AI to keep it all sort of in check.
I think, look, when you look at marketing, when you look at graphic design, I mean, Gen AI has mutilated that marketplace in terms of jobs. We just have to be careful. You know, we have to be cautious with it. It's great when you're Amazon or another retailer and you want to see what 50 sweaters look like on one hot guy, you know, so you can just, you know, switch things out. It's great for doing business. We just have to be careful.
Yep. Anyone else? Sir, come on, hold on just a moment. He's got a guy right behind you.
I don't think I ever looked like that. I don't.
Yeah, but we do know what you looked like in 1985, so right, 88. So,
yeah. Okay. I'm afraid I did look.
So as a Generation X man from Switzerland, I was taught that you have to do market research to find the path to the good product. So yesterday I was told by a young Chinese woman that she gets her inspiration back from the sales channel that they directly use by Amazon and others, where they start to interact directly with their end customers and ask them, what do you think about our product, what should be improved, or what would you like?
Absolutely.
And with that, they created a bunch of products, but just out of this mind would never come out. So how would you suggest that brands or producers or whoever in the market links directly to the end user to really get trends or interests out?
Well, I mean, a lot of people are doing that with, especially in housewares, with very solid direct-to-consumer businesses. You know, so they're gathering information and then they're creating product that consumers want, and they're kind of skipping over the retail buyer and saying, we have a lot. You know, you walk into big retailers now, and they don't want to hear what you designed. They want to hear why you designed. So you have to go in saying, we know the consumers want barware. We talk to our people. This is the new product that they want. So you know, I think it's really important to ask people. The problem is, what's that adage, Peter? Nobody ever asked for a station wagon. Nobody ever asked for a minivan. So that's where great designers come in. You have to consumers, all they ever want is repetition. All they really like is what they know. So it's you sort of look at that and you say, I saw a quote a couple of weeks ago, and it was, if we want things to stay the same, we have to do something different. And so that piece of advancement, which we think of as sort of status quo, it involves change. And if you just change for change's sake, and you're pardon the phrase, throwing shit against the wall to see what sticks, you're just, the gross to net is so small. But if you ask people what they want, if you can't ask your consumers directly, partner with your retailers. It works. It's a formula, but, and always look for who the next customer is. Always see what other categories you have permission to be in, because companies that succeed look at the experience of kitchen, of bath, of storage, of whatever it is, holistically. They don't live in silos.
We have time for one more question, if there's any questions out there. One more, right here, young lady.
Hi. Earlier in your talk, you mentioned that for Gen Z and millennials, that there's kind of this appearance that they're less interested in sustainability, but that's more a marker of the fact that it's kind of become table stakes for them.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could provide a little more context around that and kind of your view on how younger generations are thinking about sustainability.
I think that it's like you said, it's table stakes. You have to look at what you're doing now. So yes, it's about traceability. Yes, it's about material origins and the ability to get more of that materials. But when you look at other markets, like one of the interesting things in, say, the cookware industry in Europe, we just came back from Ambiente in Paris, and one of the things we kept seeing was this, how can I put it, like actual pots and pans that were stamped with recyclable product. People going towards aluminum because it's a simple. So what's the next? Consumers will always assume that retailers and manufacturers have a much larger capability to be meaningful than they do. But now they're also adopting it for themselves because the way trash is managed and recycling is managed is more restricted. So making recycling easier for them, making it easier to buy, it's one of the boxes that Peter talked about. Everything you can do to make it buyable is important. Anything you can do. And sustainability is really table stakes right now. It needs to be, but the other thing is, like this show, we've seen a lot of great glass. Borosilicate's like, and now they're putting non-stick finishes on it. So it's looking at materials and saying, what can I make that's low impact, that's volume potential, so you really just have to, and a lot of people are also in Europe leaning on produce locally and how much transportation is in it, looking at every part of the process and not just the materials and the disposability of it.
One more time for Tom Mirabile. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Tom will be around for a few moments if you want to, do you have time to stick around if people have any questions for you? And we will see you, enjoy their time on the show today. We'll see you at 1 o'clock for Pantone and Lee Eisman.